Good evening. Hey, welcome to the Lawrence County Museum. We're so glad that you're here. My name is Connie Post, and I'm the executive director here. And thank you for coming to hear Durant. This is going to be the first of a 10 lecture series, 10 battlefields in 10 months, right? So tonight is the first of that. So you're here on the ground floor, and tonight's going to be about the snow campaign. I wanted to tell you about a couple things going on at the museum. September is Constitution Month. So on September 23rd, we're going to have a presentation on the Constitution at 7 p.m. We'd love for you to come. It will be a festival of trees starting here on November 1st. If you're interested in participating in that, we'd love for you to decorate a tree. And also, we're going to have a Merry Market weekend of Thanksgiving. We'd love for you to come and be a part of that if you're a vendor or a crafter or something like that. I'm not going to take any more time because he's anxious. He's got lots to say, and I'm going to turn it over to him. Thank y'all for being here tonight.
Thank you, Connie. I appreciate that. So, again, with this lecture series of 10 battles in 10 months, and I'm taking these battles in chronological order, and, of course, the first battle we're going to be talking about tonight is the Battle of the Great Canebrake, which was part of the snow campaign. And what we're talking about now is the very beginning of the Revolutionary War in South Carolina. Now, at the time that the war started, 1775, South Carolina was divided into 8 districts. And this is under the British colonial system. This was set up in 1769 after the successful Regulators' War occurred. And the backcountry was divided. There was opposition to the British colonial rule, and in January of 1775, there was an extra-legal organization started, if you will, the first provincial Congress made up of influential South Carolinians, primarily along the coast, very poor representation in the backcountry, which continued for the next 100 or so years. But anyway, the first provincial Congress, and they were actually operating in opposition to the royal governor on opposite courses. They were like a shadow government, if you will. And things got so heated between the first provincial Congress and the governor that the governor was forced to leave his office and go to a warship in Charleston Harbor, the warship Tamar. So he still is, however, sending orders into the backcountry. And this is around June. June of 1775. The war is going on. There's a war. There's a war in the north. Lexington and Concord, that's April 19th. Bunker Hill was July 17th of 1775. 1,000 British casualties. 450 Patriot casualties, a British victory. But it was a costly British victory, and the British did not have offensive actions in Boston for the next 10 months. And that was when they left 10 months after. That was the siege of Boston. It was George Washington's first victory. Lives are being lost during 1775 in the north. However, the first blood was shed in South Carolina, in the backcountry of South Carolina, just about 25 miles from where we are right now. The first shots fired in South Carolina, in anger, was a naval engagement in Charleston Harbor when the government was really being run by the Council of Safety during this time, 13 influential men led by Henry Lawrence, who is the namesake of Lawrence County. So these Council of Safety, they wanted to stop the governor from being able to communicate with the backcountry of South Carolina, because the way he was able to do that is there was a channel behind Hog Island, which I think is Daniel Island now, but I'm not sure. The Hog Island Channel allowed the governor to send messages up the north bank of the Cooper River. And he could get into the backcountry that way, and the backcountry could send him messages that way. And that was very limited communications, but it could happen. And the Council of Safety started sinking derelict, wrecked ships in that channel to prevent transportation into the backcountry. And when the British saw what was occurring, they opened fire with their naval guns. And the Patriots stopped putting those wrecks in the channel until later that evening after it turned dark, and then they were able to finish that job. And this is the first shots that were fired in South Carolina, and this is on August the 2nd of 1775. So, other actions that were occurring during this time. In July the 12th of 1775, the first armed confrontation with land forces occurred on the Savannah River, about right here. And this is where Fort Charlotte was. Fort Charlotte was reputed to be a strong fort in the backcountry. It was built out of granite. All the other forts were built out of palisaded logs at this time. So what the British in the backcountry decided to do, they wanted to bring all their armaments in from backcountry forts and store them at Fort Charlotte. And they had 18 swivel guns, which is little small cannons, but they're mean. You don't want to mess with a swivel gun. And kegs of musket balls, kegs of powder, all sorts of armaments were all taken into Fort Charlotte. And Colonel Mason, James Mason, led a force to take Fort Charlotte. It was only manned by one individual with his wife and 5 children. And so he quickly turned the keys of the fort over to James Mason. And that was a peaceful transfer, I guess you would say. Throughout this entire time, there are rumors of British launching a raid onto Fort Charlotte and retaking the arms that they had lost. So things are starting to heat up. Now, one thing that the Council of Safety did in late summer, early fall, is they sent a delegation into the backcountry to talk to the citizens and try to get folks to sign up with the association. One early name for the Patriots was the Associators, because there was a movement afoot to get South Carolina, Georgia, all the other colonies to associate with Boston and what was happening there. Unified, united. How important is that concept? So the delegation was William Henry Drayton, William Tennant, and Oliver Hart. Tennant was a Presbyterian minister, Hart was a Baptist minister, and William Henry Drayton was a firebrand. He was, a radical revolutionary, if you will. So they went through the backcountry and they were meeting with various groups. Also with this commission were 2 names that are going to be very important to tonight's discussion. And this is Richard Richardson and Joseph Kershaw. Very influential men, and we'll be talking about them more in detail. So Tennant, Hart, and Drayton, primarily the ones who were going through the backcountry. Half the places where they were welcomed with open arms. But in others, they were scorned if folks bothered to show up at all. And during this time, it was easy to identify who the loyalist leaders were going to be. And there were discussions, there were arguments among these people. Fisticuffs did not occur, but it was really coming to a head. Richardson, Kershaw, Drayton, Tennant, and Hart really got to see the lay of the land while they were going through visiting with these different folks. And what this commission did, and it had to be done, it should have been done, you know, you try to see if there's common ground. They quickly realized that there wasn't common ground. But the William Tennant and Hart Commission solidified the divide that was between neighbors who many of them, most of them, wanted to side with the king, and many of them wanted to have nothing whatsoever to do with British rule whatsoever. So that's one thing that Tennant, Hart, and Drayton Commission created. In the British colonial system, with these districts that we have, it was a requirement that all males between the age of 16 and 45 become part of the militia. There was a militia in every county. And these individuals, these men, would gather together about once a month, and they would have a grand time. They would have shooting practices. They would horseback riding races, rum drinking contest, things like this. And these individuals would elect who their leaders were, and usually it was the fellow who did have the best rum. But that was sort of the development and the process of the militia. The leaders, the colonels of these militias were divided. In the Spartan district, for instance, the colonial militia was led by Thomas Fletchall. Very influential man. He was a leader in the regulators movement in the 1760s. Thomas Fletchall had a loyalist militia regiment that he had been in charge of for years. However, there was opposition to Thomas Fletchall, particularly in the person of John Thomas Sr., who had an opposing patriot regiment in opposition to Fletchall, extra legal, if you will. Then this is when William Henry Drayton was coming through Spartanburg County, and he looked at John Thomas Sr.'s men being drilled, and he says, they look like Spartans. And from there, the Spartan Regiment was created, and Spartanburg County and Spartanburg City. They owe that name to William Henry Drayton. There are armies in the backcountry, opposing armies in the backcountry. And these armies are led by committed loyalist leaders. There are patriot armies in the backcountry as well. So things would about come to a head. In December the 2nd, the Council of Safety decided to commission Richard Richardson, Colonel Richard Richardson. He was involved in the French and Indian War, experienced military man. He was crucial in resolving the Regulators' War. He and William Danger Thompson. We'll be talking about these fellows, but they're very influential early on. So the Council of Safety, in December the 2nd, request, this is November the 2nd, request Richard Richardson to raise an army to go in to arrest these rabble-rousing loyalists. So I do want to show you Richard Richardson. And again, he was the colonel. He was later promoted to a brigadier general So he was our first militia general in South Carolina. Again, he was 71 years old when the snow campaign occurred. He died at the age of 76. He was captured when Charleston fell, and he was treated poorly. After a few months, he was sent back home, and he died at home. If there's ever South Carolina royalty, Richard Richardson is it. 2 of his grandsons and 4 of his great-grandsons were governors of South Carolina. So that is the influence that Richard Richardson had. Also here is William Danger Thompson. Don't know where this picture came. He doesn't look very imposing, does he? I'm a little bit concerned. But he was a heck of a fighting man. He was a very wealthy planter from Orangeburg, and he had a plantation there called Belle Isle. So, again, he was a hero or a leader in the French and Indian War. He was with Richard Richardson as they quelled the Regulators and Moderators War. He was Richard Richardson's right-hand man. He was 45 years old. And in the beginning of the Revolutionary War, he was incredibly active, and I'll be going over that. And then we have a picture of Joseph Kershaw. And I don't know about y'all, but that doesn't look very inspiring to me either. I almost have a feeling that this was part of a composite group painting. He's shown sideways, and it's kind of like ancient Photoshop or something. But anyway, this is the picture we have of Joseph Kershaw. And I need to mention at this time my gratitude to Paul Wood, who has helped me quite a bit with the research for tonight. And Paul and I are working on a couple of projects together, and Paul is the one who supplied this picture. If you don't like this picture, you can blame Paul for that. But anyway, I definitely want to recognize Paul and the contributions that he's made to the discussion we will be having tonight. But, you know, while the picture of Joseph Kershaw was not very inspiring, his house sure is. This is a replication of Joseph Kershaw's house. This was Cornwallis's headquarters when he was in Camden. Joseph Kershaw made his initial fortune through the milling of flour. He apparently had some technique that everybody just loved, and he was the best flour miller around. And he also became a storekeeper. He had 2 stores, one in Camden and one in Shiraz. And during these colonial times, storekeepers was very lucrative business, if you will, planter as well. Again, this house survived after the British left Camden and burned everything else. Joseph Kershaw's house remained, but it did not survive Sherman's army, and it was burned to the ground. And in 1977, the foundation, the brick floor of this mansion was discovered. And this house, there was also a painting of this house from about 1815 that showed this in detail. So we know that this is an exact replica. And it was started in 1977, construction of this. So these are 3 important individuals for tonight's story: Richard Richardson, William Danger Thompson, and Joseph Kershaw. During this campaign, the snow campaign, Joseph Kershaw was the quartermaster. He was the supplier. He knew where to get flour and lead and powder and so forth. And he made sure that Richard Richardson and his army was supplied on their journey. So who are these loyalist leaders that the Council of Safety was so concerned about and that were causing so much trouble in the backcountry. Here you can see Joseph Robinson from the new acquisition district. This is York County. In the Spartan district, you have Benjamin Wofford and Alexander Chesney, Daniel Plummer. In Greenville County, which was Cherokee territory during this time, Richard Paris. Richard Paris was a leading loyalist and a leading thorn in the side of the Patriot forces. In the Fair Forest area, you had Thomas Fletchall, who was a leader, and also Moses Kirkland. Moses Kirkland was regarded as a huge troublemaker. And the Council of Safety wanted him arrested. And he knew that he was getting in pretty hot water from these discussions he was having with William Henry Drayton and so forth. And Moses Kirkland decided that the better part of valor would be to join the governor on his warship in Charleston Harbor, which he did, and then later he left the governor's care and became a provincial fighting with the British in Florida, and I think he may have been up north as well. Crucial to these fellas, here in Lawrence County, you have the most rabid loyalist of all in Robert Cunningham, who is a future loyalist general appointed by Cornwallis. Robert Cunningham and his brother Patrick Cunningham. And these fellows lived on the Saluda River. Also in Augusta was Thomas Brown, one of the most radical loyalist firebrands that there was. Maybe I shouldn't have used that term. On August the 2nd of 1775, Thomas Brown was attacked by the Patriot Sons of Liberty. And the first thing they did was they knocked him across the head with a piece of wood and gave him a concussion that gave him a headache every day for the rest of his life. Then they tied him to a tree and they beat him, maybe in different order, I don't know. They took burning coals and took them to his feet and burned off 2 of his toes. Then they tarred and feathered him and rode him through the streets of Augusta. Thomas Brown became one of the most influential loyalist military leaders of all. He went down to Florida and headed up the Florida Rangers, 300 strong cavalry unit. We 3 times sent expeditions down to Florida to try to quell what Thomas Brown had done, but unsuccessful every time. So these are major loyalist leaders that the Council of Safety had enough of, and they were going to arrest. So what they did was on November the 2nd, they gave Richard Richardson instructions to raise a force to go into the backcountry and arrest these guys. And starting on November the 8th, Richard Richardson collected the Camden and the Orangeburg militias at his plantation house called Big Home. It's in Clarendon County now, near Rimini. That's where his plantation was. And from November the 8th to November the 18th, he collected 1,000 men. And the campaign was on. He was going to arrest these leaders in the backcountry. Except that he got news that there was trouble brewing in 96. And what happened at 96 was Patrick Cunningham, brother Robert Cunningham, he was sending a force of 200 men down below 96 where his group ran across a wagon train that was supplying shot and powder to the Cherokees. Now, crucial to the understanding of what was going on during this time is the influence of the Cherokees. You know, the Patriots were telling their supporters the British are going to line up with the Cherokees and they're going to slaughter us. And the Loyalists were telling their supporters the Cherokees are going to line up with the Patriots and they're going to slaughter us. But fear of the Cherokees was underlying all of these actions. And the British colonial government had, by convention, been sending this shipment of shot and powder to the Cherokees every fall so they could have their fall hunt, and they would trade deer skins and medicinal plants for the shot and powder, and there was a very lucrative trade going on between the two. But when the governor got sent to the warship, that relationship was broken. The Council of Safety decided that they would send that shipment of shot and powder. Of course, then the Loyalists are saying they're arming the Cherokees. They're going to, attack us. Lots of conflicting ideas going on during this time. Well, Patrick Cunningham captured that shot and powder, Loyalist Patrick Cunningham, that was intended for the Cherokees. And he holed up in 96. Well, the leading Patriot militiaman during this time was a fellow from Greenwood County named Andrew Williamson. And Andrew Williamson started collecting Patriot militia to counteract what Patrick Cunningham had done. And so now Andrew Williamson brings a force of 450 militiamen to 96 to confront Patrick Cunningham. But in the meantime, the Loyalist armies in the backcountry, who are organized under the control, leadership of Thomas Fletchall, for instance, and others, Joseph Robinson from the New Acquisition area. 1,900 men. They raise a Loyalist army of 1,900 men, and now Andrew Williamson and his 450 men are surrounded and besieged. And this is November the 19th of 1775, the first siege of 96. When Richardson gets word that the activity is going on in 96, he shifts course. He was going up this way to the Fair Forest region to get Thomas Fletchall. But now, again, he shifts course and he crosses the Wateree, and then he crosses the Congaree. He starts to cross the Congaree on November the 18th. I told you on November the 8th to the 18th at his plantation, Richard Richardson was able to gather 1,000 men. Now, by the time he's in the Wateree, the Congarees, and that took a week to cross that Congaree River. It must have been flooded. It took a long time. He gets 500 additional men. Now he's got 1,500 men, and he gets word that the siege of 96 has been resolved. He's like, oh, okay. Well, I'll go back to my original plan, which was to arrest Loyalist leaders. So at this point, he heads up to Evan McLaurin's store. Evan McLaurin was an influential Loyalist store owner. And Richard Richardson camps out there for a little while. While he's there, militiamen are pouring in. The Spartan militia, the New Acquisition militia, Patriot under Thomas Neal. So now an additional 1,000 men come in while he's at Evan McLaurin's store, and he's got 2,500 men. December the 2nd, he goes to a place that we don't know where it is. Camp Great Survey on the Duncan Creek. Duncan Creek runs from Lawrence County into Newberry County and then to the Broad River. Somewhere on Duncan's Creek was a place where Richard Richardson camped, and while he was there, an additional 500 men came in. And these are men from North Carolina. From his home place, from his plantation, he sent out letters to all these Patriot militiamen saying, hey, we're gathering a force together, we're going to arrest the Loyalists. And the North Carolinians responded extremely well. And they gave some Griffith Rutherford, some of the leading North Carolinians came into Richard Richardson's camp. 4 days after Great Survey, Richard Richardson is in Liberty Hill. And this is in Lawrence County. This is in the northeast corner of Lawrence County, just across the Newberry County line, this side of the Enoree River. And while the North Carolinians are coming in, now Richard Richardson's got 3,000 men. And he knows that Patrick Cunningham is still out there, because after the siege of 96, everybody just kind of went home. Patrick Cunningham, he still has the shot and the powder. And he goes into the wildest, most remote place he could possibly dream of, and that's in southern Greenville County in the middle of a cane break. But Richard Richardson knows that Cunningham is somewhere in that area, so he starts heading that way, and he comes to Hollingsworth Mill, which again is in Lawrence County. It's on Raven Creek, and it's where Dirty Creek intersects with Raven Creek. And when Richard Richardson gets to Hollingsworth Mill, now Andrew Williamson and his militia and additional North Carolinians and Georgians, a few of them, they all gather together and they come into Richardson's camp at Hollingsworth Mill. One of the conditions, one of the provisions of the treaty that broke the siege of 96 was that both sides would go to their homes for 20 days waiting to get commands, instructions from their leaders. So the 20 days is up. Now, December 21st, Williamson brings his men with North Carolinians and Georgians, 2,000 strong. Now there are 5,000 men down at Hollingsworth Mill, right down there on the Reedy River, where it intersects with Dirty Creek. This is the largest army that's ever been in western South Carolina. This is the largest group of armed men. The total number at Cowpens or Kings Mountain or 96, they never totaled 5,000. So this was kind of an incredible achievement. Joseph Kershaw, all the time, providing them food. One reason they went to Hollingsworth Mill, I'm sure, is because of the grain that was stored there. So the night of December 21, Richard Richardson gets word that Patrick Cunningham is in the Great Canebrake in southern Greenville County, 25 miles away from Hollingsworth Mill. And volunteers, hand-picked men, 1,300 strong, are chosen to go after Patrick Cunningham. And many of these men, 750 of these men, are from North Carolina. What's these North Carolinians doing? Why are they the ones chosen to go after Patrick Cunningham? They were chosen because they had the best horses. And if you're going to ride down from North Carolina to counteract Loyalist activity, you're going to have a good horse by the time you get here. So those 1,300 men are sent to attack Patrick Cunningham and his 200 men that are camped in the Great Canebrake. And overnight, William Danger Thompson, he's in charge of this group. They travel up the banks of the Reedy River, and it is cold. In Richard Richardson's letters during this time, he describes how cold it was from 10, 15 days previously. Cold, cold, cold in December. So William Thompson and his men are on the way. And what they do is they come to the Canebrake. Now, this is a plat from 1785, and this shows where the Battle of the Canebrake occurred. This is the Reedy River. Today, we can trace these exact curves in the river. They're still there. You can see them. That area right there is the Canebrake. It's a total of 640 acres. It's 1 square mile. Every bit of 2/3 of that is the Canebrake. Where on this area did the Battle of the Canebrake occur? There's been a lot of discussion about that, but it has been determined where it occurred. And where it occurred was right here, right in this bottomland here. Thompson and his men coming down the river, both sides of the river. At dawn, they've just about completed the encirclement when the shots from the sentries ring out and gunfire erupts. Patrick Cunningham sticks his head out of his tent, and he sees that the hills around him are covered in patriots. So he hollers out, "Shift for yourself." And he jumps on his horse bareback. And Richard Richardson says, some people say bare breeches as well. And he skedaddles up the Reedy River, along with 70 other escapees. 130 of these men are captured. There were 4 to 6 Loyalists killed. One patriot, Thomas Polk, 17 years old from North Carolina, he was wounded in the shoulder. The men had their hands tied behind their backs. If they had decent shoes, they were taken from them. They may not have had shoes to begin with. And the next day, they marched to Richard Richardson's camp at Hollingsworth Mill. Now, I've always been told, I've always said that as soon as that last patriot or Loyalist had his hands tied behind the back, it started to snow. But I have recently read a letter from Richard Richardson saying that the snow began at Hollingsworth Mill the day after the battle. The snow. The biggest snow that's ever been in the backcountry. I'm telling you, there is no records of any snow being deeper than 18 inches. And some reports say it was 30 inches. But it was 18 inches. And Richard Richardson says that for 8 days to sleep, the men had to grub out the snow and lay down in that, barefooted. Did they have blankets? Probably not. So it was gruesome, brutal situations. Going down to Charleston, it takes 2 weeks to walk down to Charleston. So this is what happened at the Canebrake, and I do want to show you, this is what River Cane looks like. The Loyalists were in the middle of this. Canebrakes have been defensive structures for the Native Americans for centuries. Because when you're hiding in a canebrake, nobody can ever sneak up on you. The rustling leaves make entirely too much noise. So it is a place of safety. And today, I'd like to show you what the battlefield of the canebrake looks like. That's a blurry picture. It's a picture of a picture, but it was a picture taken when the canebrake was in snow. And I can't wait till the next snow because I'm going to take my own pictures then. But these trees you see, these are pecan trees. These are pecan trees planted by the Hopkins family. The Hopkins family has owned this site, this property, since 1834. And in 1876, at the 100th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, they planted a grove of pecan trees, an alley of pecan trees. These pecan trees are 145 years old, and they're still living. I had no idea that pecan trees could tolerate bottomland conditions like this. But these trees are still at the Patriots Grove is the name of this place. And there were 34 planted. Most of these trees have died. Not all of these standing trees you see here are living. I am the caretaker on this site. And one thing I've done is I've planted another row of pecans on the outside of this, matching what's planted now, so that 100 years from now, those pecans will be dominant. These pecans here will be gone. But that's part of battlefield preservation techniques that is being instituted here at the Battle of the Canebrake. Well, I wanted to see if anybody had any questions. Yes?
The winters of the American Revolution were especially harsh, and that period has been called a little ice age.
That's right.
Extremely brutal winters.
Yes, the question is about how brutal the winters were during the American Revolution, and there have been some references that it was actually even a little ice age. Yes?
Was Richard Paris there when they raided his mill?
So the question is, was Richard Paris there when his mill, when his home place was raided? No, he was in jail. Richard Paris was arrested, as Richard Richardson was making his rounds. So he was arrested and he was put in jail. I have a real beef problem with the 70 individuals who escaped from the Battle of the Great Canebrake. And these individuals went to Richard Paris's plantation. Now, yes, he was in jail, but Richard Paris, here in Greenville County, was one of the wealthiest men in the backcountry. He had a store. He had a fort, he had a grist mill, he had a whiskey still, he had a 2-story log cabin that was covered in clapboard. He had a sawmill. Sawmills were rare in the backcountry. So he was very wealthy. He was there illegally, but his son George wound up with the deed to the property. But Paris was a problem. Paris was at the first siege of 96, and he's one of the ones who arranged that truce then. But the 70 men who escaped from the canebrake and went into Cherokee territory, and we know exactly what they did and how they did it. We know this from the autobiography of David Fanning, who was one of the most influential loyalists in the backcountry. He later led a regiment in North Carolina that captured the governor of North Carolina and whisked him down to Wilmington. David Fanning, as a 19-year-old, was at the Battle of the Great Canebrake. But these individuals really caused trouble with the backcountry settlers, and they incited the Cherokees to go on the warpath. And make no mistake about it, the Cherokees went on the warpath. Several theories about who was responsible for that. The Shawnees came down. They wanted to have a joint front attack all along the back the Appalachian Mountains, starting a two-front campaign. The British agents, Alexander Cameron, John Stewart, how much influence did they have on getting the Cherokees to go on the warpath? Is those 70 who were wound up at Richard Parris's plantation are the ones who encouraged the Cherokees to go on the warpath. Now there were 61 settlers that were killed in June and July of 1776. And July the 15th of 76, 102 of those escapees, plus other loyalists as well, 102 of them, they were dressed as Cherokees. People who do that, Europeans who dress as Native Americans, that's what we call a Scopholite. 102 Scopholites and 88 Cherokees came into Lawrence County again and attacked Lawrence County at Fort Lindley. So these loyalist individuals led this attack into Lawrence County at the fort of Fort Lindley. The attack was broken. They retreated. Many of their leaders were arrested as well. But this is one of the first actions in the Cherokee War of 1776, August the 1st of that year, 2 weeks after Fort Lindley. This is when a Seneca, where Clemson campus is, a Seneca was destroyed. There was a battle there. August the 12th, Tomasi was destroyed. Just all the 16 towns in South Carolina, in Pickens and Oconee counties, they were absolutely destroyed. And it's the actions of those 70, to me, this tragedy rests upon their shoulders. So that's another one of the little theories that I have, but all the evidence points to that. Any other questions? Okay, sure. Yeah. He's curious about the map here. The audience can't hear what y'all are saying, so I'll be repeating the question, but go ahead and ask. How were these established? So that's the Broad, the Congaree, the Wateree, the Santee. That river, definitely established that. I believe that's the PD. This is one of the Ace Basin rivers right here. I don't know how that line got there. This line, which is the current line between Anderson and Abbeville County and Greenville and Lawrence County, that was determined in the Treaty of Charleston in 1763, and that line was defined as a point from the westernmost point in South Carolina that had been surveyed, which was DeWitt's Corner. A line would go to the southwest to the Savannah River and northeast to the Reedy River at that 45-degree angle. And that line was surveyed in 1765. And as soon as it was surveyed, right there where the Reedy River crosses, the governor of North Carolina, the royal governor of North Carolina, was there with a survey party. And he ran a line due north from this point. and he claimed everything to the east of that to be North Carolina. So from 1766 till 1772, Spartanburg County, Union County, Cherokee County was North Carolina. And it wasn't until 1772 when the boundaries were redefined, and they were redefined after a court case was held. And this court case was in London. So that's how they determined where the North and South Carolina line were at that time. The boundary between Greenville County and Spartanburg County was drawn by the royal governor of North Carolina in 1776. We've kept that line to this day. So most of these boundaries are due to rivers.
Was that always the extent of Cherokee land there? Did they ever have more than that?
Yes, they did. This entire area, the old 96th district, in the Treaty of Saluda in 1755, that's when the 96th district was sold to the Cherokees, one of the few sales that there ever was. All of the European Americans wanted to buy Cherokee land. They really did want to buy it. Now, whether they're going to pay a fair price or not is a different question. And selling land is just an incomprehensible thought to the Cherokees. This is one of the tremendous clashes of cultures between the two. So, and I've read that Treaty of Saluda. It says that territory is being sold for goods and other considerations. Now, what does that mean? But what it did evolve to mean was that the Cherokees were getting that fall shipment of shot and powder in return for deer skins and medicinal plants. So it was beneficial for both people, and that's one reason it lasted 22 years, one of the longest lasting treaties there was. Excuse me. But that's how that process worked out. Well, if nobody else has any questions, I appreciate your attention and your attendance as well, and thank you very much. Yeah. Yeah.